Hey there, everyone. Hope you're doing well this Friday evening. It's 7 p.m. Central, so you know what that means. It's time for another Blender live stream. And tonight we're going to be kind of jumping back into the project we've been working on the past few weeks, but we're going to be doing a little bit more of a deep dive on one particular model and trying to create an asset as quickly as possible. So tonight's going to be a little different than normal because we're going to be jumping into Substance Painter as well and taking a look at how to sort of go back and forth between the two pieces of software. You're also going to get a little bit of a preview of 2.8 as well. So quite a bit going on tonight, but hope you guys are doing well. Let me know in the chat what's going on. If you would like to talk about anything, I'm here for you guys to kind of answer questions and just whatever you want to talk about. I'm here for that. So let's do it. I'm gonna get my screen ready to go over here, and while I do that, let me just make sure everything looks good settings wise. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys what. Um, there we go. I'm gonna go ahead and show you guys what the finished product of tonight is hopefully gonna look like. So as you can see here, we've got Blender 2.8 loaded up, and basically just have a small chair asset, and then I have 3 area lamps, and we're going to be using Eevee to preview what this looks like in sort of a game engine type thing. So I'm going to go full screen here and then turn on Eevee and let you guys see what's going on. So there's a little bit of a glitch still kind of here with Eevee. What you have to do is kind of move your asset around. If that doesn't work, you can jump into your node setup and just kind of select a few nodes, move some things around, and usually it'll update. And then at that point, your asset should be showing up correctly. So let's go full screen again, and let me deselect everything. So you should be able to see kind of what we're doing here. Now up close, this is not going to hold up to a lot of scrutiny. This is not meant to be AAA level. We're doing conceptual based sculpting and texturing. The point is to get this done as quickly as possible so that if you're creating an asset like this from a distance in a 3D scene, you've got enough to kind of work with without it being terrible looking. So this will probably be in the background out of focus, which is why we're not spending a ton of time on this. But as you can see close up, we got some textures thrown on here, painting this up in Substance Painter, sorry. And yeah, it's not perfect. There's a lot of problems with this, but like I said, for a quick 2-hour demo, we'll be able to push this a little further tonight so that you guys can see how this looks as we are throwing this together. So that's kind of what we're aiming for. Hopefully it'll look a little better than this because I did this really quickly. But yeah, that's what we're going to do. So turn this off. Now I'm going to start in Blender 2.79 because that's kind of where everything is that I'm working on. So I'm going to open this back up. Not 2.8, 2.79. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and open up, well, let me go ahead and open up the scene that I've been working on. So this is the sort of 3D conceptual image I've been working on for the past few weeks, and just off and on, an hour here or there. And here's the chair that I just showed you, kind of pulled in from tonight. And what we're going to be working on is trying to take the base model of this chair, which I think I deleted it out of this layer. But basically, it's just a simple box, and then we're going to be turning that into something hopefully a little better. So these started off like this couch, and sort of throwing this together into this scene. And I've been working on some lighting and all sorts of stuff. So let me turn all this back on and give you a quick preview. And you can kind of see what the mood that we're going for with this lighting. It's going to be kind of hard to tell that these aren't really worked all the way up to the finished product, especially from a distance. So there's a lot more to add to the scene at this point, but here we have kind of a starting place for where this is going to be. And let me go ahead and see. Okay, so what we're going to go ahead and do is grab an asset, and it can be this chair. That's kind of what I'm planning on, but we could also do the couch. So you guys let me know what you want to work on tonight, and I'll be happy to kind of jump in and work on anything that you guys want to work on. But now is the time to kind of let me know what you would like to see, because we're going to have to make a decision pretty quickly here. And so on layer 1, I've got my little scene set up, and then I've got the wall split off on layer 2. Then layer 3 has all my lighting, and this has actually a domain for some volumetric rendering that I was doing. So anyways, if you're curious about the setup, that's kind of what's going on there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open up a previous version of this scene so we can kind of see the chair that we have here. And I'm going to start from here, pick up where we left off last week, and just show you guys kind of what I did to get it to this next level. So the first hour or so is going to be all sculpting, and then the next hour I'm going to do texturing, and we'll get into 2.8 towards the end. Okay, so I'm going to move this over to layer 5. Let's reposition this. And I'm just going to go ahead and clear out this file. And we'll start from scratch. Okay, so we've got our rotation I want to clear out. Locations cleared out, scales all 1s, so that's good. I'm going to save this as another copy, and let's call this, here we go. Okay, so this is a really basic blocking of the chair, and we still have a little bit more work to do on it to get it to the point where we want to start sculpting on it, because it'll just be easier that way. Let's jump into edit mode. I'm going to add in an edge loop here, and then grab these faces up top. And then I'm going to go ahead and kind of add a little bit of curvature here. Might inset a tiny bit. And then I'm just going to pull that out a tiny bit. Okay, so let's grab this ring of edges. I'm going to bevel that by hitting Control B and throwing in some more of those. Let me turn on my screencast keys here. So those are going to be in the lower left-hand corner if you guys want to see what these keyboard shortcuts look like. And I'm just adding in a tiny bit more geometry so that we have some resolution to work with here. Okay, so let's grab this, rotate that up, move it over a little bit. I'm not going to spend a lot of time tweaking any of this stuff because we're going to be sculpting on this, but I want to kind of get this in a better place. So the other thing I want to do is kind of throw in some sections where these legs would go on the bottom. So I'm going to cut that there. And then on the back here, do that. Okay. Let's move this in the x-axis. I think I edge slid instead of moving, which was not what I wanted to do. Okay, there we go. So let's grab these two faces on the sides, and I want to bridge the edge loops. I'm going to grab all of these faces on the bottom and delete those. Join all of those together. Join those together, and then we're going to need to dissolve these extra vertices. And let's see. Hey Murga, see you in the chat there. No, I'm not on Twitch. There's too much trying to keep up with the chats in both places, and I'm more of a fan of Facebook for this sort of thing. So I'm gonna go ahead and dissolve these. Okay, got some interior faces and some weird stuff going on here. Alright, I think it'd be faster to just kind of get rid of this. tweak this up. So let's do that. And yeah, I'm not on Facebook. I'm on YouTube. Okay. Now let's merge that. And rather than resolving all of this stuff, and gons and all that, I'm just going to leave that alone for right now because we're going to go ahead and sculpt this. And I want to go ahead and cut that hole in the back of this here. Okay, so we'll pull these apart till they're about the same distance there. Go ahead and cut these faces. Okay, so should be good enough to start with, and then we'll just play with it. Go ahead and save. Let's jump into sculpt mode. And right off the bat, I'm going to go ahead and turn on dynamic topology. It's going to warn me that there's edge data detected, and that's because I had UVs before. So I'm going to get rid of that. And let's turn the detail size up to something like 6. I'm going to want to mirror this over on the y-axis. So I'm going to turn that on. And then we're just going to grab our little brush here and start playing. So let me grab the clay strips here. Okay. So what I'm doing now is just really quickly and lightly going over areas in the mesh so that we can add in geometry. And then we'll go back and start sculpting on that stuff. So looks like it's not going to be a fan of those end guns. So let me jump back into object mode and let's get rid of those. Sorry, this is taking longer than it should, but I want to prep this the right way so this works out. The joys of being live. Alright, I'm gonna start, let's jump into front view and line these up like that. Go ahead and get rid of those. Okay, extrude this out on the y-axis. And then just to speed this up, let's go ahead and delete half, and we'll mirror this over the mirror modifier and turn on clipping. Okay, this should be a little quicker. Okay, I'll bring that down. Yeah, sometimes it just doesn't want to be an easy mesh. So I used booleans in my practice session to do this, which turns out was a better move because it made it easier to resolve this topology. So anyways, almost finished. All right, there we go. So we got our base mesh. That took way too long. All right, let's jump into sculpt mode and get going here. Clay strips. Try to remember not to use ZBrush shortcuts. Dynamic topology. 6. Let's throw a mat cap on. Okay, we'll start with the symmetrize from -y to +y, just in case. And here we go. Okay. So, like I said before, very little pressure. I'm just adding a quick pass on the geometry to get some geometry added with the dynamic topology turned on. Okay, so what we're going to try to sculpt here is a little bit of a sort of wingback high chair. And start with the major proportions, try to get that stuff locked down in the base mesh. But if you haven't, you can still move things around here, but do it earlier rather than later. So grab our grab brush here and kind of do something like this. Kind of get a little bit fancy with the shape here if we want to. And I'm going to do kind of the same thing that I did in my practice run that you guys saw, but I'm going to try to take it a little bit further for you guys so that you can see kind of what's possible in a short amount of time. So try to get these kind of positioned. Yeah, so I'm using Dynatopo, but I'm just, before I add a ton of detail, just making sure I have the legs and everything kind of put in place first, because I want to do a little bit of an animal motif with the way those are sculpted down there, and it'd just be easier to move them instead of having to smooth them and push them around and use a snake hook and all that stuff. So now that we're kind of in a better place there, let's go ahead and start just throwing on some clay. Oh, no worries, man. You're good. Okay, so we can smooth a little bit. And so much of this really starts coming together when you get it kind of, 70% of the way there, and then you just start creasing the edges. in terms of adding those those crevices in there, and then coming back with sort of the trim dynamic, not trim dynamic, that's ZBrush. Flatten or scrape peaks, we'll do it in Blender, and that's where it really starts to kind of look like a hard surface model. So before then, if you start sculpting on it using these more organic sort of brushes, it's going to start losing that man-made feel, but that's okay as long as you kind of know how to bring that back. So you'll see what I'm talking about as we get in here. So I'm adding some thickness to these areas where there needs to be upholstery. This is probably going to be leather or fabric, and so I want it to be a little bit more wrinkly, and it's stretched, but it's got some give. And occasionally with the dynamic topology, what I'll end up doing is coming back in and I'll symmetrize using the mirror axis because it tends to get out of whack as you're playing around. So just remember that, and don't let the symmetry kind of fall apart on you, because it really does save a lot of time. So just gently smoothing these edges down. I want this front end to have sort of cushiony, curved feel on this edge. So I'm going to smooth that down a little bit. And then on the back side, I'm going to keep those kind of sharp. So this is where we could grab our flatten or the scrape peaks and kind of get that going. Let's see. I'm using subdivide collapse relative detail, which there's no reason for any of that. It's just, subdivide collapse is intentional. I use that a lot, but relative detail versus constant just depends on kind of what I'm working on, and if it ends up working out better one way or the other, depending on the situation, I'll switch it around. But yeah, it has to really be a pain in the neck for me to switch every setting. So I'm going to inflate this edge a tiny bit so that we're not going to start getting in those negative areas and getting weird things happening there. Okay, smooth a little bit. Yeah, that's decent. Okay, so I'm flatten this side back down a little bit, and just trying to think of the materials that I want to throw on which areas. These are going to be wood down here. There's probably going to be a wood frame. So yeah, so if you guys are curious, Emerga's talking about the detail settings for the dynamic topology here. So these have to do with how the geometry reacts as it's trying to tessellate the mesh, turn everything into triangles, either add geometry or take geometry away. Subdivide collapse is good because if you're getting less detailed, or you're increasing your detail size here, it's going to remove edges as you go with collapsing the geometry, which is kind of nice. Subdivide will actually help you do that when you increase as well, which is good. This one's a little bit different in terms of the way it behaves between these two, so you just have to experiment a little bit with that. And then with this one, you've got just subdivision. So you can think of these as opposites in terms of collapsing or adding, and then you've got this one that does both. So again, just play with that a little bit. This relates to how it decides to choose the detail that's being added, and this is depending on right here, we've got mesh details relative to the brush size and detail size. So it's going to take the detail size that you have here as well as the brush radius up here, and it's going to use that to determine what you're working on. So as you zoom in and out, that's not really going to have an effect when you're using relative detail. Constant detail is just using the detail size. Brush detail is using the brush. So again, it's kind of the same as above. This one's a hybrid. This one's using one or the other. So if you just want to use the brush size to control the detail that you're adding in, you can do that. If you just want to use sort of like where you're zoomed in and sort of that way, you can use this relative detail, constant detail, whatever you want to do here. So anyways, let's keep going here. Make this a bit smaller, zoom in here. And just kind of giving that a little bit of a bevel. And we're using flatten, but scrape peaks is a little bit better of a brush for this. Okay, so that's the sort of thing you would need to do to bring back that hard surface sort of look and feel to this mesh. And as we get towards the end, I'll go back around and kind of do this to all the areas so that it feels more, refined. All right, let's take a look at, all right, we'll start with the inside here. Still need to get this cushion kind of worked up, so I'm gonna bevel this a little bit. And it helps even with symmetry on to kind of rotate as you go and look at both sides. The lighting shifts a little bit, and so does your perspective with your eyes. So you just kind of want to pay attention to what's going on. So this is another thing you're going to want to do with hard surface is pay attention to where the creasing needs to be. So cut this in here and separate these two objects, and it will really help give a sense of definition for where the cushions start and end and all that kind of stuff. So anywhere there's a material shift that's kind of important, I'd throw this in there. So smooth this down a little bit. Of course, looking at reference is really the key here to make sure you know how this all works and is put together. I've done this a few times, so tonight I'm not looking at reference to kind of speed up, but that's it's not something I'd recommend. Okay, so once again, we'll start back here, just kind of go around. Okay. So I'm losing a little bit of definition there, so I'm going to jump back in here and throw in some more clay. So I don't want to sort of make the back side of the base look a little anemic. That's going to make it kind of look unstable. And one of the biggest tips I can give you if you're trying to do something conceptual in nature like this, which is not something a lot of people normally do. Most people are going to be working towards a super finalized level of detail, but if you are trying to create something that has a little bit of a sort of conceptual vibe, you can get done quickly just to get an illustration finished or show off, something like we're doing tonight. You want to be able to zoom out, and if you look at the silhouette by itself, that needs to work 100%. So I would focus a lot less on getting in here and detailing things out with sculpting so that when you bake normals it looks great. And what I would focus on is making sure that depending on where this is going to be in the scene, and since I know this is going to be pretty far away from the camera, maybe about there, how I nail this silhouette is going to be key. So that's kind of what I'm focusing on right now, is just making sure that whatever big changes we make are, changes that we feel are going to, add to um, how this is put into the scene in such a way that we're not wasting time, because it's really easy to get in here and spend tons of time working up these ideas. And again, it depends on your goals, but my goal for this illustration is to get it done quick and move on. And I don't want to be, I just don't want to be adding tons of hours onto how this is working out. Um, America's asking kind of what the plan is here. We've got a little bit of a paint over to kind of show where this ended up. So let me pull this up. So this is started with a basic, quick render. This was like the first night we were working on this, and then I went into Photoshop and did a little bit of a paint over to kind of just give a general direction of where we're headed. This is sort of a Harry Potter, Slytherin, common room type thing, and this was actually an anniversary present for my wife. So she requested a little poster I could print out for her, and so that's what we're making. But so the catch was I needed to do this quickly and move on, and so I'm trying to get this all done within 2-day period, something like that, if you add up all the hours. And so it's going to be conceptual. So everything that's sort of in the center part of the image that is central to kind of the idea of what we're trying to tell with the illustration is going to get more detail as we kind of go out towards the edges to less and less things that are maybe out of focus, or there's less attention in the darker areas because of shadows and all that kind of stuff. Those are going to get less detail, and instead we're going to jump into Photoshop and kind of paint over and just do whatever we got to do fast to get that worked up to a level that's acceptable. And so it'll be more of a 2D, 3D hybrid scene, and it'll be more concept art than it will be finished render. But it's an interesting hybrid, so it's going to be something that's kind of fun. Yeah, she's a lucky one. At least I think so. I gotta be careful what I say. She may be watching this. All right. Okay. So I'll tackle those legs in a second, but I'm gonna jump back up here and get this cushion kind of in a better place. So again, the most important thing to think about here is what is this made out of, because that's gonna dictate kind of what details we end up throwing in this. And if it's leather, it's a little lumpy, so that's fine. You can leave it kind of like this. If it's fabric, you'd want it to be a little bit more taut. So, you want to pay attention to that. Down here, we don't have a lot of definition for how this would wrap around, and so we need to think about that. So let's add in some clay down here. And that's going to make it kind of look like it wraps around and tucks. And then through here, I don't exactly know what's going on down here. It's not super important, but we add in some more clay, smooth that out, just to give it a solid base there. And then for these on the sides, let's go ahead and try to refine the way this is all creasing up and make it look a little bit better than that. So now is the part where we can zoom in and figure out where these creases need to go. This is gonna come down back here. And then at some point, we have to decide kind of, okay, so where does the arm begin and end with the back of this chair? And let's bring this down somewhere around here. Okay. So once you've got that in, you can grab the pinch and tighten that up. Just go across that. And that'll just pull that crease in so that it's nice and tight on that edge. Now, this is where the subdivide collapse thing will kind of come back to bite you, because you get them too close together, it's going to kind of squash that detail. So if you want, you can switch it off of that. I'm going to go ahead and lower the detail size a little bit, which usually tends to do the trick at the expense of adding more geometry. But, you know, at the end of the day, we're not really going to be worried about that too much, because we're going to quickly decimate this thing or remesh it or something like that and get it to a place where we can get into substance. Okay, so let's crease this up back here. And then you can automatically see from a distance like how much better that looks now that we've just taken a short amount of time to go back over this and crease that up. If you're having trouble getting straight lines, you can use the smooth stroke here, which will kind of delay how your mouse reacts. And if you need that, that is there, and I use that quite often depending on kind of what I'm doing. Okay. So remember, with symmetry on, it's saving us half the time there, so that's good. Go ahead and kind of copy this same strategy around here. And just constantly remind yourself, you know, if it's not really affecting the silhouette, how much time do I really want to spend on this? Because this stuff from a distance here, you'll be able to see. Back in here, maybe not. So if you find yourself zooming in like this on a corner, you know, just remind yourself and zoom back out, because it's not productive. Okay, so let's clean the back one up, and then let's kind of sculpt these legs a little bit. Okay, so we need to throw the crease in so that it's back here a little bit better. Okay. And it's amazing what you can imply with the right positioning of creases and folds and things like that in clay. It doesn't really take a fully textured model to see fabric or leather or skin or whatever, as long as you kind of know what you're doing. Okay, so we'll smooth this part out here, keep the crease tight there, and that shows we've got one material going up to this crease, and then there's a little bit of a bulge which shows there's another material starting, and or at least another piece starting, which we can imply as a different material by changing the surface texture and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so let's jump back in with some clay strips and start getting this mess kind of figured out down here. Okay, so remember, as we go, it's going to be adding geometry for us. We want to keep this pretty well flat on the ground, so don't tweak the bottom of it too much. But all I'm really doing here is implying some things going on. So we know that these are probably going to be some sort of animal legs. Who knows what they are? They could be lions' paws in the end, or they could be hooves, or they could be talons from a bird. And it's, again, we're working towards something that from a distance looks like what it is, and it's going to be carved out of wood. So All you gotta do is get close. Okay, so I'm gonna smooth that little sharp edge back. And then let's go ahead and start defining what some of this looks like. So if we want, we can grab a snake hook, pull some of this stuff out. And you want to make sure it's at the right size and sort of more towards the ground. So I'm going to pull it out here just a little bit, just subtle here. You can also go in with the snake hook, which is not something a lot of people know, but that can be helpful as well. Okay, so it's looking like it's heading in the right direction here. Whoops, undo that. Okay. So that's our next level of refinement. We'll work on the front legs to get those back to that level. Switch back to our clay strips. And we're really just getting rid of the blocky edges here so that we don't have any of those cubes still hanging around. Okay, let's grab snake hook again and just kind of decide what we're going to do here. Bring that out. Okay, this will be quite a characteristic chair. A lot of interesting things going on with this one. So what's going to be important to tie this all in so that it feels intentional is to make sure that the curvature and the bumps are looking like they're one cohesive unit. So here, if we start a curve here, we want to finish it gracefully out here, sort of with an S shape. Same thing here. We want to start here, and we like where the positioning is on the bottom or on the top. Wherever we want to start this from with the correction, we want to make sure that that follows this nice sort of S shape. So I think what we want to do instead is come in and then back out like this. So let's go ahead and correct this with the snake hook tool here. So I'm going to grab the back of these, just pull in a little bit, give it a bit more of a graceful curve like this, and then we're gonna push back the other way. Something like that. And then after you've got that finished, go back in with the smooth and just make sure there's no edges on the silhouette that's going to throw that off. And if you have to go backwards one level of refinement to make sure everything's working, then do it. Nothing's final here. We're just quickly trying to get things in place. Okay, so we need a little bit more girth up here. So I'm gonna add that in. And then just rotate around, checking the silhouette from all the angles. Just kind of see what needs to be pushed or pulled or whatever. Okay, so that back leg's looking better now. So let's work on the front leg a little bit more. So just holding control there to dig in a little bit more instead of adding clay. Okay, so we're getting that curve back to a place where it looks like it's sort of an S curve, which is what we want. Just like that. See that graceful curve like that. So front matches the back, which is good. We go sort of from front angle and see from side to side what's working and what's not working. Now this one, I may just use the grab tool, bring the brush size up real high, and then just pull that in. Now with dynamic topology turned on, this can get really computationally intensive. So just for this tool, we may go ahead and switch that off. Just telling Blender we don't want to add any more detail. We just want to move stuff around. And once you've got that, it'll speed up quite a bit. So just very subtly tweaking this curvature. Just kind of nudging things in place here. Okay, and you're not going to be able to get it 100% with the grab tool, so you're going to need to go in and kind of smooth after the fact. And I'm not using very much pressure at all to smooth there. Okay, so now we've got something that kind of looks like animal feet of some sort. We got about 10 minutes left to try to figure out what we want to do with all these details. So let's now jump back in here and we will turn back on dynamic topology. I'm going to go ahead and just, for safety, symmetrize from negative y to positive y one more time. Okay, so now we can go ahead and start working on some of these details. So I'm going to start from the top and just kind of work my way down here. And let's go ahead and grab scrape peaks. Right at the top here, I'm going to flatten this area down so that we have a ridge on that backside. And then I'm just going to curve this around so that it kind of feels like we have a bigger cushion. Very little pressure. Just rotating around that curvature so that it's staying nice and smooth. And then we go back with shifts and get all those surface imperfections smoothed back out. Okay. And on the back side, I want to go ahead and pinch this up. So let's grab, smooth that out right there. Lower the size back down, and then we'll pinch. And what's interesting about the pinch brush is that it will actually move the geometry towards where you're pinching. So if you want to try to straighten this line as you go, you can actually pull that off by just kind of repetitively going over the same area and smoothing out your stroke. And that will straighten that line out for you, which is kind of interesting, the way that works. So still keeping this loose, but we're trying to define where things start and stop right now. It's not going to be perfect. So we have to kind of make peace with that at this point because, you know, we're trying to do something conceptual. So just know going in, you're not going to hit that AAA game asset level if you're doing something for real time and you want to do something fast. You know, people spend a lot of time on that stuff, so you're going to have to do that as well, or it's not going to turn out that way. But for me, for this project, it's not really necessary because this level of detail from a distance is plenty. Okay, so let's go ahead and smooth here. Then I want to go ahead and pinch all of this up and just bring this up to the final level of detail up close. See how that straightens that line out? So interesting. Okay. And there we go. Starting to look like something. Okay, so for those areas that you want to make feel a little bit more like cushions or something like that, you can grab the inflate tool and you just go back over, and what you might do is turn off the pressure sensitivity for the radius, just so that you've got a sort of constant level of inflation. And then you can go back in. Now you can see what that subdivide collapse is doing. It's taking out that detail as I paint in. So we want to stay away from those edges. And I just want to kind of grab the middle of this down to the edge and make sure that we get a little bit of cushion here. So now I'm going back with shift, smoothing this out. And that's kind of all it takes. Just like that. Okay. So let's do the same thing for the back of the chair right here. And add some detail into this. Now, I'm going to let Substance do a lot of the surface level detail for me, so I'm not going to worry about adding, buttons or anything like that on here if it's leather. I'm just going to try to round this out and make it feel comfy to sit in. So we might throw in a sort of cushion area up top here. Another area towards the back. And then we'll have to resolve sort of how this fits together. So this is going to be sort of cushioned around to the outside edge. Starts bulging in the middle and then kind of goes out to the sides. Okay. Okay. Kind of like that. And then if we want to, crease something like that. Really depends on what you want. Get really bold and come in here and do a sort of crease where the fabric would be connected. Again, not super necessary for this sort of thing. And, you want to be careful adding too much of this before you get to texturing, because it can be kind of a waste of geometry, but it can definitely add some realism to your mesh. So if you have a big wide empty space, that'll definitely solidify it as feeling a little bit more grounded in reality. Just like that. Okay. All right, so for the last couple of minutes, I'm going to go ahead and work on the legs a little bit more. Grab the clay strips here, and down towards the bottom, I want some sort of animal legs or something going on. So I'm going to bring this out like this. Hey Merga, yeah, I see your comment. Yeah, man, you should try doing the sculpting because it's a lot of fun. How much have you played with it? Have you experimented at all, or how long have you been kind of working with Blender? I'm not sure if you can or not. You can try. If you can't put a link in there, send me a link at brandon@theorangeguild.com, and I'll be happy to take a look at it. I've actually got a new course that I'm working on this month that should come out before November. That is for absolute beginners. So if you're not on the Orange Guild mailing list, make sure to jump on that because I'll be releasing that and it's going to be free. So um, definitely something to look out for. Okay, so I have no idea what this is, guys. I'm just at this point I'm just playing around, but let's go ahead and grab the crease brush, and we're going to add some separations into these claws or whatever these are. It's Brandon B. Oh, I'll just type it. Brandon at theorangeguild.com. No problem. Okay, so yeah, who knows what that is? Something magical, I'll wager. All right, let's get the back worked up, and then let's jump over and see if there's anything else we need to add in before we try to texture this up. Smooth this top area down a little bit. Okay, so I'm just trying to decide where the front of these little claws are going to go and adding in a little bit more clay on top of everything so that those jet out a little bit more. And you know, there's still time and stuff to grab the snake hook and pull things out further if you need to or whatever. But at this point, since we're just kind of doing a demo here, I'm not gonna waste the time. Awesome. I will check it out after the stream, and let me see if I can get a response back to you tonight. If you haven't seen the video I uploaded this week on the YouTube channel, check that out because I'm inviting people to leave comments on what they're kind of struggling with or want help with, and that way I can respond to you there too with some feedback on any kind of specific questions, or since you're here live, you can ask me here too, and I'll be happy to talk with you one on one about just what's going on. Oh, cool, awesome. What'd you think of it? Was it helpful? I've got a lot more of those types of videos planned where we talk about different topics. Okay, I think that's decent. Let's do one more thing to these legs before we move on. So, yeah, a bit depressing. Yeah, I didn't intend for it to come off that way. It was just one of those things where you get to editing and it kind of gets away from you, but I wanted it to be a little bit more inspiring, so I'll try to keep it not so heavy-handed in the future. All right, so I'm grabbing the flatten tool and I'm going down one side, trying to get that crease here, and I'm gonna line this up with the claw, and then I'm gonna go down the other side, and again, it's like giving me two effects. It's flattening out both sides, and it's kind of amplifying the crease that's starting to appear down the middle. So it does two in one for you. Hey, Colonial Planet, thanks for joining the live stream. Good to see you. We're doing good. We're building a conceptual asset. We're about to take it into substance once we can get this sculpting side finished and quickly UV unwrapped. So again, flatten down one side, flatten down the other side, and that automatically throws that crease down the center, just like that. And it just kind of feels like it's been carved a little bit more that way into that shape, so it's kind of cool. So again, if I had more time, I'd do that a lot, but we're gonna run out of time here, so let me go ahead. This has bothered me a little bit. It's a little bleh, just boring. So I'm gonna grab the grab tool, make it pretty big, and then I'm gonna pull this up just to kind of give it a little bit more flair right there. Okay, we're gonna call this done. No intention to get into the industry just as a hobby. Yeah, so that's cool. I think a lot of people are that way, and that's totally cool. And we've all got fun stuff to work on. So, yeah. All right. So I gotta get my head in the game. Here we go. Go back into object mode. Let's throw the matte cap off, and I don't need whatever materials on this. Get rid of that. Okay. So we've got a chair here that is about 500,000 polys, and that's a problem because we're going to want to keep this fast for two reasons. One, we need to get into substance, which does not like high poly objects. And two, when we get into the conceptual side of this illustration, everything needs to kind of stay low poly so we can render quickly, make adjustments on the fly. I don't want to get bogged down poly counts or, heavy effects. So we're going to want to work on getting this rebuilt. Now, typically what I would do if I was working on something for a 3D illustration and sort of a production methodology is I would retop it. But we don't have that much time tonight. So I'm going to show you kind of a quicker way to do this to get somewhat usable topology as far as just trying to get textures on it and UV mapped, but this is not a great way to work normally. So we're going to use remesh, and I'm going to turn this up until we can kind of get the entire silhouette back on our model. And before this crashes on me, I need to save. Okay, so we'll go down. Let's start with like 7. Yeah, so I'm not decimating it because if I decimate it, it's going to be terrible and it's going to be very hard to UV unwrap. So I'm remeshing it. And remeshing it, it doesn't look like it right now, but it's going to leave me with quads, which is kind of what I need to get some sort of useful UV map out of this. So I'm still going to have to do some cleanup, but it should give me enough to save me some time. So I'm going to play with some of the settings here just to see what we can get out of this. I don't want any crazy weird artifacts like this happening if I can avoid it. Some of it's going to be inevitable. I'm probably going to have to clean this up. Yeah, so I could decimate it. Let me just talk about the difference. Like, I'm going to duplicate this and move it over. Okay, so we got our original sculpt on the right, our remeshed sculpt on the left. So if I decimate, because we were using dynamic topology, and you can see, you know, obviously it's terrible right now, just tessellated all over the place. Yeah, I could take this way down using decimate, which if I wasn't gonna, you know, if I always worried about was having a mesh to work on for retopo, then that wouldn't really be a problem. But in this case, I need to have this be my final mesh, so I don't have to retopologize this. So if I decimate it, I can get it down to, I don't know, 5,000. That's kind of the aim that we're going for tonight. And yeah, about 5,000 is probably where I can go before I start losing stuff. And it looks good, but it is going from that to, let me get out of edit mode here. We apply the decimate. So it's still going to go from that to this. And the problem with that, since we aren't retopologizing, is that getting a UV map out of this, I think it's going to be a lot harder. So because we're going to use automatic mapping, let's just see. I haven't really played with this because I always retopo first, but let's just see what the difference is here. So we're getting way less of a good silhouette here, but we're going to get all quads, which is a plus. So okay, so let's apply the remesh here. Jump over to our other layer. And before I do that, let me undo this. Duplicate that, move it to a new layer, and that way we've got our original somewhere. Okay. Yeah, so we're going to try both. We're going to try both and see what works. So the upside of decimate is I'm definitely going to get a better poly count with a better exterior silhouette that I won't have to correct. But we're going to end up with triangles and non-symmetrical triangles all over the place. So I'm going to apply this where we're about the same poly count. It's about 1,000 more. But let's just say, okay, we're good there. Let's take this other one, throw it on layer 2. And so this one's, again, about 1,000 less, and this one's all triangles. So now what I'm going to do is we're going to jump in and quickly UV unwrap this. And we'll do both. So this one, again, the big problem with traditional UV unwrapping, if you actually want to take the time to do that, is that there's no symmetry and it would be very tedious to come in here and try to put seams in and UV unwrap this the old-fashioned way. So we're pretty much going to be stuck with automatic unwrapping. Now this will do it. The real question that we're going to have is, do we have overlapping faces to worry about? How much of that are we going to have to correct versus the remeshed version? And the upside, again, with the remeshed version is that we have the opportunity to go in and add seams relatively quickly if we want to get a cleaner unwrap. So yeah, let's just see what happens. So let's jump back to this layer. And as I said, this one's all quads. So if we smart project this one, I don't know, it may just look cleaner. Again, I think the real upside is that you've got the option. So if you want to jump into edge mode, and then just make sure those are all pointing out with the normals. And I'm going to take this, and since it's symmetrical, or it's supposed to be, I'm going to add a split right down the middle of the model with an edge loop. I'm going to go ahead and delete half of this. And let's throw on a mirror modifier, the y-axis. Okay. Which means we're really only UVing half of it. So we'll start here, go to there. Try to hide the seams where there actually would be seams, obviously. And so we just mark these seams. Okay. So you want to kind of think of this as unfolding like a flat box. So go ahead and turn on selection linked by seamed. That way when I hit L, it's going to stop wherever the seams cross over. So we can grab this. This one's already got UVs, but we're going to undo all that. So let's just hit U and unwrap. And it's going to use the seams as they already sit to try to unwrap accordingly. And this is not going to work because it's going to stretch everything. Yeah, substance, you got to have unwrapped meshes because it's for texturing game assets. So you got to have UVs. And it won't do them for you, so you got to have them when you bring them in. Okay, so we're going to want to pick where Blender is going to cut this mesh up by marking these seams. I'm just hitting Control E to do that when I have the edges selected. And you're just cutting this apart like a cardboard box that has tape all the way around it. So the better you can get it kind of unwrapping this, then the better you'll be at kind of getting everything where it needs to be. So what I want to do is get enough cuts here to where it isolates this this mesh. Now we got some problems here. We got some overlapping things going on. Don't really know what's happening there, but we need to fix that up. So because we got this thing mirrored, I'll go ahead and grab these. I just want to make sure it stays kind of all quads. And it should resolve pretty easily because we already, we made it quads when we remeshed it. So there we go, grab that piece. Now that unwrapped pretty well, so I'm going to leave that alone. And I kind of like to unwrap and just move stuff out of the way as I go. This one down here, we need to figure out why it's going all the way across, and it's because we don't have the seam cut here. So we need to kind of figure out how we want to cut the seam in. So we'll start here with an edge, and I'm just holding control and right clicking, and it automatically finds sort of the shortest path for me to create an edge loop. So we'll mark that seam, and now when we hit L, it's going to stop right there. So hit U and unwrap it. It's going to flatten that out for us. We'll move that over here somewhere. And I'm just kind of unwrapping, working my way at the bottom, and then kind of going up. So we'll grab these. Now these, you can use cylindrical unwrap, and it'll usually flatten them out for you. And it'll depend on what your settings are over here. So this is the tool palette. You can say align to objects, view on poles, see what that's doing, view on equator, and it'll just depend on what you pick there. And if it doesn't end up working with cylindrical unwrap for you, sometimes it works better if you're in a locked off orthographic view. So you can try that from one side or the other. Or you can put a seam down the vertical axis. And again, we're going to do this back here since you're never going to see this seam. Now, I can tell you right now the reason why that cylindrical unwrap didn't work is because we don't have the bottom of these cut off with the seams. So we would need to take the very bottom part of this and cut all the way around so that that's isolated. So we have the caps of our cylinders isolated, and then we have the middle part. So we would take the bottom, unwrap that, that's flat, and then we would take the middle part and we would unwrap that. So this is where you'd want to use cylindrical. I'm going to go ahead and just throw a vertical seam because that will be faster. So just pick where this is going to line up and be sort of hidden. Mark the seam, and then when you select this and unwrap it with the normal unwrap, it will lay out flat. Okay, so select everything, make sure nothing's kind of overlapping right now for clarity's sake. Yeah, so the quad policy is for deformation only, because eventually everything will get turned into triangles. The problem is that it also creates issues when you're UV unwrapping. So if these were triangles, trying to do what I'm doing now is it's more complicated because it's harder for Blender to figure out where the edge loops are and all that kind of stuff. So I don't want to go to triangles until I have to go to triangles, and typically I only do that when the software does it for me. So so let's go ahead and cut this in here. Okay, I'm gonna clean this up. This is a little weird. This is where the creasing kind of got tucked in on itself and created some weird things going on. So we just want to fix this up. Okay, make sure there's no other weird things going on. Okay, so we'll grab these, line this up a little bit more. I'm just using edge slide to kind of straighten this out a little bit so that this crease is going to go where I want it to go. And let's decide where we want this to terminate on the backside. Okay. So we'll do, got this laid out. We have that laid out yet? Okay, mark that down. And then in here, we need to pick the seam that we want to hide. So we'll start here. And I want to end up somewhere over in here. Okay. So now I'm looking for natural areas where the seams would kind of pop up. So we know back here where the upholstery is kind of tucked in, leather or whatever, that somewhere down this line there's going to have to be something that has a seam because it's man-made. So we're going to try to follow this line as best we can down through here. And ultimately, my goal is to kind of overlap the material anyway, so this isn't going to show up, but, you know, we'll see what happens. If I had more time, like I said before, I would spend the time to make sure this was retopoed in a way that this would make all this easy. So let's grab this section, unwrap that. That's looking good. And let's grab the back piece, which should be the last thing that we have, and we unwrap that. Okay, so let's grab all of it. I'm going to grab every single UV island that we have here. I'm going to hit Control A to average the size of the islands based on the size they are in the 3D viewport, so they are proportional to each other. Then I'm going to hit Control P to pack them into a 0 to 1 UV grid so that those are lined up correctly. Shouldn't be any overlaps if you do that, and you know, we can double check that. We can quickly add in a new UV grid to see what this looks like on the mesh. So we can grab color grid here, hit OK. And I'm going to go ahead and smooth that. Jump into the node editor here. Add a material, add in a texture, image texture. Grab the UV image that we just grabbed, and as long as you have it selected, if you hit Alt-Z, it'll put you into textured mode, and you should be able to see how your UV map is laying out on your mesh. So again, it's not perfect. There's going to be some problems, but it's symmetrical, or the mesh is symmetrical, the UV map's not, but it's laid out in a way that it'll work. Okay, so good enough. So for the last half hour, let's jump into Substance and kind of get work on this thing. So let me kind of talk about how we're going to do this. And I'll just switch back over real quick to the camera. So the workflow as it stands right now is basically we want to export an OBJ from Blender into Substance, do all of our work there for the textures, and then instead of going back into 2.79, I want to go to 2.8 straight away. Now the problem is 2.8 doesn't have all the features yet, so I can't just import an OBJ straight from Substance. I have to actually save a file in the old Blender version so that it can be opened in 2.8, and then I can start working on stuff. So it's kind of weird, but it's a workaround. So bear with me while we kind of work on that. So let me open up Substance real quick, and let's get this going. Now I'm not going to bake anything in Blender when we start exporting and all that stuff. I'm going to do all the work over here in Substance. So we're going to save out 2 OBJs. So I'm going to save or export this selection only as an OBJ. And I'm going to create a new folder. Throw it in there. And let's call this chair. And then we're going to go back to our original chair here, the high res, which is on layer 11. We're going to export that as selection only, and we're going to call this chair high. Now, I haven't gone to the trouble of creating any custom vertex groups or anything like that, so Substance isn't going to know what part of the mesh is supposed to be what material and all that stuff, and I've done that on purpose because I don't want to have to waste the time of, doing that on a conceptual piece. So once this saves, we're going to do everything else in Substance. So I'm going to go ahead and save this one more time, close this out, and then let's jump into Substance and start a new project. So I'm going to use the PBR metallic rough workflow. We're going to use a 2048 CUK texture. Make sure you're using OpenGL because that's what Blender reads as its normal map format. And then you're going to want to select your low res mesh to begin. So I'm going to select the chair and just hit OK. It should load that in, no problem. And now you can see that. Now, this is actually my old object. So let me start a new project with those same settings. And I want to go into the new folder and grab the chair from here. There we go. Okay, that's our chair. So now what we need to do is bake the high-res normals. So we're going to jump over to the texture set settings, jump down to bake mesh maps. And we're going to want to set this to 2048 and grab our high definition mesh, which is chair high. And we're going to bake all those maps. So this is going to bake ambient occlusion, normal, material ID, curvature, a lot of stuff. And we'll just let that finish, which shouldn't take very long on a low-res mesh. And we'll move on. Okay, should finish, hopefully without any errors. I don't think we got any. And any of the little artifacts we noticed from the normal map baking weird, I'm just going to ignore tonight because we're going to have to move on to get this finished. So all of your maps are baked and thrown into here. Jump into a new layer, and we're going to start adding in materials. Now, there's going to be a lot of materials on this one, so we just need to figure out what we want to do. I'm going to search for fabric, and if you hover over here, you can kind of see what these look like. Leather, and the most important thing I'm kind of looking for right now is what the texture bump looks like. So if I'm happy with that, I can always kind of adjust the color. So I think I'm going to go, I'm going to go with this one. So if you just drag this over into your stack over here, it will go ahead and create a fill layer with that material. And if you zoom in, you can kind of see what this is looking like. So holding shift and right clicking and dragging will rotate your environment around the mesh so you can kind of see what that looks like. And if you want to adjust your scale of your texture, you can drag this up and down. So something like that. And then for the color, I'm going to go for a much richer, kind of dark leather like that. Okay, now what I want to do is kind of break this up with some other materials. The obvious first one is the wood at the bottom. So we're going to want to search for some wood. And you can kind of separate this up a lot of ways if you don't have vertex groups and Blender to separate things out for you. Because if you did, what you would typically be able to do is jump over into your texture set list, and instead of having one listed off here, you'd have several based on your vertex groups, or not your vertex groups, your vertex colors, um, which would come in with your OBJ. So that way you could have different materials for each of these separate substance painter layers or whatever. And it would change your entire layer stack. But we're not doing that because we want to keep this fast and loose. So we're going to grab a wood grain material that we're happy with. I think this one is good, and we can tweak the colors and stuff. And you can either start with a blank layer and select the material you want to paint with, or you can again drag in a fill layer and then just control the masking. So what you do now is right click and add, let's add a black mask, and then you can go back in with the mask selected and then just paint on the areas that you want to have the wood like this. And as you can see, it's pretty quick to do that. If you want, with the fill layer, the other upside is that you still have control of all of your material assets, attributes, which are going to change on the fly because it's a fill layer. And so this wouldn't be available to you if you're painting individual strokes on just a regular paint layer. So I can still change the rotation, the grain, all that type of stuff by selecting that and just kind of doing that. So that's helpful. And then obviously the wood, I'd want to probably change. And I don't know, we might go for an ebony type of look for this. So bring that down like that. Now it's going to be hard to see that, so I'm going to keep this bright for right now so I can see what parts are leather and what parts are not, but I'm going to go back and tweak that later. So quick keyboard shortcuts here. 1 on your number pad is the paintbrush, 2 is the eraser. So you can really quickly switch between those two if you need to. So get the front and the back done here. And once again, we're looking for something that works from a distance. If it looks like wood, reflects like wood, all that sort of stuff from back here, then it's doing what it's supposed to do, and I'm happy with it. There's always more we can do to tweak things, but we're on a time limit. I want to make sure that we're not wasting that time. So let's bring that color back down to a nice sort of ebony color, and I'm going to shift this into more of a, yeah, let's go more of a bluish sort of ebony. Kind of up to us, it's our world, so why not? Okay, now what I did before was added in some more sort of inset textures here for the upholstery. So we can get really creative here and once again, I'm going to type in fabric, and I used this sort of fabric, this little pyramid thing, to throw in some stuff. So this time I'm going to just grab a regular layer with this fabric selected, and pick a color. I'm going to use sort of like a Slytherin dark green leathery color here. And we'll pick sort of a view here that would be easy to paint the front of this from. We'll start kind of up here. And we want to also dial in the size. So let's see, for these buttons, let's do something. Yeah, let's just go black. We can throw some tests on there to see what that looks like. If it's not big enough, just increase your brush size like this. You can also, you know, turn up the hardness for your brush here. But I'm gonna want to go a little bit less intense than that. So what I kind of like about this is that it feels rich, but it's also got a bit of a snake-like vibe, which is kind of Slytherin-y. So if you want to draw straight down, you can start and then hold shift and then just left click somewhere else and it'll draw a straight line down for you. So since we're going to want to connect all of this, you want to get into a position where you can actually see the projection. And here it's overlapping in kind of a really weird way, so we're going to want to play with the spacing on our brush a little bit here. So let's bring this up, and I always start with about 33% because it seems to do well with the spacing. So yeah, let's do that, and then I want to soften this up a little bit more again. Yeah, something like that. Okay, so we're gonna throw that stripe straight down the front of the upholstery here, kind of turning this into a weird sort of gaming chair, rich gaming chair. I don't know. We're just having fun tonight. And I'm going to do the same sort of thing on the sides. So I'm going to center this, go down from the top view, and then go straight down like that. Now with this on, we don't have to have a mask. We can basically just switch into our erase, and I'm going to turn the hardness all the way up. And now we can kind of define where this starts and stops. So you can see with that hardness cranked, kind of what that does. Really does a good job of kind of defining that edge for you. Okay, so we can do that same sort of process on the center here to define where this is kind of leaking into and where it's not. Clean this up right here a little bit more. And then let's do that. So we'll start here. Go down the middle. We're just cleaning up that fuzzy edge that's there. So this looks very intentional. Yeah, I hope so. We'll see what the wife says. But that's what's great about Substance is that it's just so fast to be able to come in here and try stuff out. Um, and what's great is it's perfectly realized lighting. You know, there's nothing false about the way this is lit. All the textures are consistent with the way they react to the lighting. So it's a great quick way to work on stuff, and um, more and more I'm adapting this workflow for even non-real time stuff. Okay. I don't know. It's pretty cheap, man. It's I mean, 25 a month is it's not much considering what you pay for all these other programs. Um, I think a lot of us get used to Blender being free and we think that everything else is expensive, but it's not. It's not super expensive. Um, Photoshop comparatively is expensive, or Maya is expensive. Um, okay, so what else do we want to do? Grab a new layer, and let's just add a regular paint layer, and let's work on some stitching. Go to our tools, and let's see what we can find here to play with. I'm always surprised by stuff that I find digging around in here. So let's pull this up. And I'm looking for something that will give me the ability to kind of throw in some seams around the outside of this model. So we've got zippers and metal stitches right here. Could be good for some stapling or whatever, but I'm not super into that for tonight's model. Brushes. Yeah, we got stitches. There we go. Let's see. Yeah, that'll work. And for the stitches, we're going to want we got cotton, not underbrushes. We're going to want materials. Yeah, I mean that's true. There's a lot of alternatives out there, but you know, substance is where the industry's at, and yeah, I guess as a hobbyist, it just depends on how much you want to invest in the hobby. So, mm, why not? I'm not even sure if this will matter, but let's grab a pattern here. Okay. Let's see what this looks like out of the box. Let's try this instead with a fill layer. Okay. Now I want to change the color up on this. Yeah, I don't know of any open source alternatives to Substance either. I like Blender for everything, and I wish it could do everything, but it just can't, and it never will. And so, it's tough, but it gets to the point where it's like eventually you just have to decide how far you want to go with it and decide to throw on the investment or not. But, again, it all depends on your goals and what you want to do. So let's try. I don't know what the fill's going to do here. Yeah, that's not what I want. I want to tweak the color. So let's select the fill here. If we add this fill and make it like bright red, let's see what happens when we paint it. Yeah, there we go. That's what I want. So I want to make these stitches a different color. I want to make them something kind of like that maybe. We'll just keep it monochromatic for now. And with the brush settings, let's just see how this kind of goes. Who knows if we'll ever see this, but that's okay. There's enough going on with this model for it to be flawed enough that we really shouldn't start picking things apart right now. But it's good enough for you guys to see kind of the process. Okay, so let's do the same thing over here. And of course, depending on how well it's UV unwrapped and how your textile density is working out for you, you're going to notice a big difference in the way this textures. So areas where it's stretching or it's a different size than the rest of your model UVs, you're going to have blurriness where the texture map isn't able to stretch that far and stuff like that. So you just want to pay attention to that kind of stuff. Yeah, for something we did in 2 hours, it's not bad. It's very hard for me to let that perfection go. But I think that's part of the thing with this project that I'm having to learn is like um, when you have those creative limitations put on you, sometimes you have to learn how to just sacrifice certain things, and it's one of those things where it's up to you to pick what you sacrifice, but eventually you gotta move on. So yeah. So anyways, I think that is gonna do it. If we want to, we can obviously come back in here and add a lot more, detail to certain areas, emblems or stamp stuff on here or whatever. Too much and it starts looking pretty tacky, so you want to watch that. But one of the other things I did on the other one was I threw on some dust and just some wear and tear. So if you grab you want to grab a new fill layer and you want to make this whatever your dust color is going to be. And then you want to go to your smart masks. And I used dust soft. And then you tweak how much you want of that kind of showing. So grab your mask here, mask editor, select that, and then it'll switch to all your settings. And then you can just tweak the balance of, how old is this chair, start adding in some story there. Contrast. You just, again, you don't want to get too heavy-handed if that's not what the story is about, but enough to show, okay, there's some wear here or some dust on the surface. And then for the wood, I did something similar. I threw on what was it? Was it ground dirt? No, but that doesn't look bad. I did something to darken this up. Interesting. Alright, I'm gonna get rid of that. I don't know what that's doing to my mask. Anyways, not bad. So let's, before we wrap, let's get this over to the new Blender version. So I'm gonna save real quick. Can't believe we made it through that entire session without saving. That was not a good idea. Oh. Okay, so now that's saved, let's export our textures. So I want to select that folder, and it's going to export all of these automatically. Make sure you have Blender selected in this case, and just hit export, and it'll go ahead and export that. Okay, let's close this. And I'm going to go ahead and open up a new Blender file in 2.79. Okay, so I'm starting with a blank file. We're going to re-import the chair that we just worked on. So let's go here, grab the low-res chair object, Import that, and I'm immediately going to go ahead and resave this as a new blend file. And that's what we're going to reopen in 2.8. So I'm going to open that chair file, and there won't be anything here. So I'm going to turn off our grid and our axes, so those are not showing. And then we're going to need some lights. So I'm going to go ahead and throw in some area lights. And I'm going to make these pretty big. Okay, so I'm just going to throw a quick 3-point lighting setup together to get us going here. And before get everything started here, what I want to do is quickly throw together a PBR kind of texture. So it's going to come in with the cycles setup, or what it thought was the best cycle setup from the OBJ, which is a mess. It's terrible. So I'm going to delete that. I'm going to add a material output, and I'm going to add a principled BSDF. Connect those up. And now if we save real fast, make sure we're on Eevee instead of cycles, and then we can try out the shading here. This has been a little bit buggy, so hopefully we won't have any problems, but we'll just see. Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to set up my graphics card again on the settings, or it's gonna crash. Okay, so rather than waste much time, I'm gonna go ahead and kill this. Let's open this up again, and I'm gonna go to Edit, User Preferences. Okay, those are all on. So if I'm on Eevee at this point, okay, so it's working there. That's weird. I will be super happy when they get all these bugs worked out at 2.8. And what's crazy is, since I'm using an AMD card, I have to wait until all the NVIDIA bugs get worked out before I can get a working version. So, oh man. I wonder if it's set to render a GPU, and that's what the problem is. Let's try that out and see if we can fix it. Okay, so I'm going to go down to my performance. Yeah, it's set to GPU. Let's set this to CPU. And there we go. Okay. So if you got an AMD card, make sure you switch that to CPU. Okay, so this is the basic principled BSDF without our textures applied. So to apply those, I'm going to show you which ones you need to bring in. So if you grab an image texture, I don't think the multiple images import is working yet, so you're going to want to grab the base color, throw that into the base color setting here, duplicate that, and then you're going to want metallic is pretty much useless in this case because I don't think we had any metallic, but I'm going to go ahead and throw it in, turn this to a non-color. Going to want normal OpenGL, which we'll put down here, and then we're going to want the roughness. And that's going to go right in here. Now, for the normal OpenGL, you're going to need to include a vector normal map. Make sure that's set to non-colored data, and then throw that into your normals. Okay, so let's turn these up. I think I had these set at like 500, something like that. Should be set to use Filmic. Okay. There we go. Okay, now some of the other settings that I kind of turned on here. Just go ahead and make this full screen so you guys can see it. I played with some of the settings for Eevee. So if we look under the render tab over here, with sampling, you can of course increase this. You might turn that all the way up to like 128. See what that's doing. Of course, with your GPU, this will be a lot faster than this. Let's see. Post-processing. Oh, it's still using cycles, that's why. Real quick, you need to find... Okay, so now we got Eevee going. Should be real time. Problem is that it's still got a glitch with the shaders. So grab your textures here and just kind of move them, move your objects, and then it should update without a problem. Okay, so now that that is fixed, should look pretty much the same way it looked in the substance, and now we can start turning on our extra options for Eevee, which is really cool. So I like to throw the bloom on, which is kind of fun. Yeah, that's fun. Let's see. I don't really need volumetric. Okay. Well, I think that's looking pretty good. And maybe eventually I'll get this this 3D scene all the way over into Eevee, and the whole thing can be real time. And who knows? Throw on a VR headset, walk through it, or just play around. But basically, that's it, guys. This is kind of the process to go back and forth between Substance and Blender and into Eevee at this point. And it's not perfect, but it's a good demonstration of kind of how it works and what you need to do to kind of get going. If you got more time, definitely get some practice in. And anyways, so hope you guys have had a fun time tonight. At this point, I'm gonna sign off and go grab some dinner. So yeah, I'll be back next week, Friday at 7 p.m. Hopefully before then you'll see another video from me. I'm going to try to get a tutorial up on, I think I'm going to do scene optimization and cycles. So that'll be the first tutorial on the Orange Guild YouTube channel. And yeah, I've got so many courses in the works behind the scenes. One of them's going up this month. Should be an intro course for people that are new to the guild, that are interested in Blender and kind of new to Blender, just kind of an overview. It's going to include a free ebook with some bonus tips on how to level up your skills. So all that's free for you guys. So if you want to be a part of that, all you got to do is get on the mailing list so you can get notified of when that's happening. If you wanted to get on the mailing list, just go to theorangeguild.com and you can sign up there. And yeah, so that's it for me tonight, guys. Hope you have a fun weekend. Stay safe, stay warm, and I'll see you next week.